Hey everybody! Long time no see on this particular streaming channel. I've gotten lazy over the past year and I've transferred to largely doing stuff on my cell phone. But here we are again today, back on Restream. We are studentloanjustice.org. We're the first, the oldest, the largest, and in my humble opinion, the only uncorrupted group actually fighting for actual, not pretend, actual student loan justice. You can see our website at studentloanjustice.org. If you're watching us on Twitter, then I can dial in your comments. So if you have any comments and you want to make any comments, head to our Twitter channel. That's just x.com/studentloanjust1. And hopefully we're also streaming on YouTube and Facebook. But we'll see. It's been so long since I used the streaming service. So I won't bore you with all the details of what's happened over the past 8 months or whatever it's been since I've done live streams on this platform. But we're here today with a very special guest, Miss Lisa Ansell, a professor at the University of Southern California Kasdan Institute. Lisa has been intimately and strongly involved in the fight for student loan justice since 2020 and really before. Lisa's published articles in the Los Angeles Times, in the Jewish Journal. She's appeared on many different news programs over the years, both locally and nationally, I believe. So Lisa, how's it going there in Southern California?
You know, it depends how one would approach answering that question, Alan. First of all, it's great to see you again. It's great to be here. It's great to continue to be part of this most righteous and just cause that we're doing. Things are tough. Things are tough out there. Here I am, close to 4 years debt free, but no less scarred, no less committed to the full cancellation of all federally held student loan debt and the return of bankruptcy protections to all student loans.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. For those of you who don't know Lisa, she was one of the lucky few to get her loans canceled through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program 4 years ago. But like many of our members, I don't know if you'd call it PTSD or like many of our members say, even those among our members who were able to get their loans canceled, they report lasting consequences, psychological impacts of this debt, not to mention monetary, just because, and you can talk more to this than I can, but the idea of so many years of your earning lives being sucked away into the black hole of paying off student loans. So I wanted to talk today. I want to focus a little bit on where we are now, the current situation. We have a new president. Donald Trump is in office, and it would appear, I'm sorry to report, we've got some pretty high hope for Donald Trump, but I'm sorry to report that up to this point in his term, he has done almost nothing but kowtow to the student loan swamp wing of the Republican Party. He announced he was closing the Department of Education, but that's really just bluff and bluster. It was more performative than anything. What he did was just made the loan programs far more complicated. He didn't cancel any loans. He didn't close the Department of Education. Department of Education still exists, and it has legal ownership and authority over the federal student loan portfolio. Just that the SBA is now sort of shoehorned in there as yet another agency to confuse the matter. The big numbers are this, depending on how you count it, only 1/4, in other words, 3/4 of all student loan borrowers are not making payments on their loans today. Finally, we've been screaming that for years, but finally the New York Times reported that last Monday. And they reported that it was 2/3 are not paying, so 1/3 are paying. And that's when you don't include borrowers who are in school. So I'm happy with that. But we are looking down the barrel, student loan borrowers are looking down the barrel of a terrible situation going forward, starting on May 5th, when, as you know, the repayment pause is over. the on-ramp to repayment is now expired. And the collection companies are going to be given the green light to hound us to no end, thanks to the Department of Education, Linda McMahon, on May 5th. So I think that's like next Tuesday. So tempers are flaring, let me say. And I don't know if you've noticed this too, Lisa, but there is a marked increase in really pissed off student loan borrowers. Have you noticed that around campus, or?
Right. I would say more on social media, but I think what's so important to highlight here is that there is really an emerging groundswell of awareness that at least I see coming through, on social media, really on X, Twitter, in terms of people who are telling their stories of having borrowed a certain sum of money, having repaid a sum far exceeding the amount that they originally borrowed, and still owe at least 3 times that amount. And these distressed borrowers really span demographics from Gen Z through senior citizens. So I feel that the pain that people, sort of visceral pain that people are experiencing through the predatory nature of these loans, is something that is becoming, I would say, much more prevalent in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, and just for our viewers, hopefully you can see I'm sharing my screen here, and here's just one example.
Anyone who still doesn't see that this rigged.
Let me start that.
I'm gonna keep posting about this all day because this is bullshit. I went and logged into my federal loan account, and this is what I found. I graduated in 2011 with $46,000 in student loan debt. My loan debt is now almost $90,000 fucking dollars. In that time, I've been a social worker that has made income-based repayments on my loan for years, and that shit has almost doubled. You wanna know why people are pissed off about their student loans? It's not because we can't get anyone else to pay them for us. It is because you have set it up where we can never pay them off ourselves. And then you sit here and tell us into our faces that we are lazy, that this is somehow our fault, while cheering on banks and auto industries and Elon fucking Musk getting subsidies of millions of dollars a day. Anyone who still doesn't see that this is rigged against us can get fucked. I'm gonna keep posting about this all day because this is bullshit.
So I don't know this person, but she needs to come to student loan justice. I love that, quite frankly. I'm going to be honest. And let me scroll down just for a minute, and people can check out some of the stories that we've been posting for the past 5 years or so. This woman is definitely not alone, let me say. These
types of stories, Alan, are becoming more and more prevalent in social media. And I hope that we start to see more honest journalism around what this young woman is experiencing, because she is not atypical. She is unfortunately part and parcel of this highly broken and predatory system. We've been reporting on similar cases of people borrowing, repaying far in excess of what they're borrowing, and still owing a colossal sum. So what this young woman is unfortunately experiencing now, and so truthfully expressing, right, is the frustration that we as a movement have been expressing for the past, 20 years, Alan?
You're exactly right. And people, you can see the slideshow for yourself. Yeah. This is an old slideshow now. It's like 5 years old. But this is more the rule than the exception for student loans. Even before the pandemic, the Trump appointee who ran the federal loan program, he told me that 85% of all student loan borrowers were never going to be able to retire their student loan debt. 85%. And I can only imagine it's probably a little bit higher now here today, not lower. The lending system is just completely broken, but it's more than broken. It's weaponized. Right. The bad guys want us paying for the rest of our lives. The bad guys clearly want us to remain in debt for the rest of our lives. They designed this lending scam, and it is a scam, exactly this way. And so, what we said to Donald Trump on one of our daily actions, I think yesterday, we said, President Trump, and we showed him the video of the girl. We said, picture this times 30 million. And that's my best estimate for how many people are up in arms, like this person, over their student loans. And I said, you don't want this to happen on your presidency. But starting May 5th, we're going to see some very nasty things. We're going to see people lose their minds. We've already documented over the past even 2 years, we've documented multiple horrible tragedies. Not only just suicides, but even murder. And, let me give you one example. So there was a guy in Pennsylvania. He sued the federal government. He sued the Department of Education over his student loans. Predictably, he lost. And I leave it to you all to look more into this story. His name was Justin Mohn, Mohn. You can Google the story for yourself. But suffice it to say, this kid, well, he's not a kid, probably 30 years old, he declared war on the federal government. And he even murdered his own father, who happened to be a federal pensioner, in a very grisly way. I don't even want to, I'll spare you the details. It's just too terrible. But these are the sorts of edge cases that I fully expect will proliferate over the coming weeks, months, and years if the collection hounds are allowed to ravage us as they so clearly want to do. The debt collection industry, it has been their golden fantasy to see a mass default on student loans. Call it a debt strike, call it whatever you want, but it has been their golden fantasy to see a mass default on student loans in the continued absence of bankruptcy rights. This gives them carte blanche under law to abuse us to no end and extort crazy amounts of money from us under the law. And so I should say our number one goal in this group, and pretty much the only thing we're focused on for this president, first and foremost, starts with the return of bankruptcy rights to the loans. So, and Lisa, you've written a lot about, it's not just student loans and the borrowers who are affected. And it's not just on student loans. This is tied into many other public policy problems in this country, like housing and homelessness. Maybe just talk to that a little while, and maybe talk about some of the articles you've written recently.
Right, sure. So, since really becoming involved in student loan justice, really out of a sense of desperation and hopelessness, right, I began exploring the overlapping crises of unaffordable housing, predatory student loan debt, homelessness, and low wages, with particular focus on public servants, right? I'm an educator, but this extends beyond, but I have started to really explore these issues, interview a lot of people who suffered in similar ways, talk to politicians, local and national, put on events at USC and at other community partners. Student loan debt is really at the crux of other equally devastating crises that there really isn't you can't solve one without taking a hard look at another, right? One crisis fuels another. On a personal level, the years that I had spent in student loan debt, after I should have been eligible, I'll back up a little bit. I should have been eligible to receive public service loan forgiveness in 2017. The program was first started in 2007. In theory, I should have been eligible in 2017, having put in those 10 years of requisite service in the field of public service. So I applied. I was promptly rejected, right? Which sent off sort of a multiple years long saga of reapplying, getting rejected over and over again for nonsensical reasons, literally, such as not using the right color ink on the paper, forgetting to dot an I, forgetting to cross the T. I mean, when you think about it, it was just blatant excuses to deny me my lawful loan cancellation. And I want to be careful to not use the word forgiveness here, but rather cancellation, right? Because forgiveness.
Yeah, don't call it forgiveness, please. That hurts my ears.
Right. Forgiveness implies penance for something wrong, which we did not have.
Yeah, well, we're not criminals here. We committed no crime. Pursuing higher education is not a sin. None of that nonsense. If anything, the bad guys, the lending beast, it should be on its knees begging for our forgiveness, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
And just a little data to back up what you just said, Lisa. In the first 3, 4, 5 years of public service and the other income contingent repayment plans, the success rate for people trying to get that forgiveness who'd done the time, paid, did what they had to do, was less than 1%. And that's exactly what I foresee happening going forward, particularly under the current administration. We're a nonpartisan group. We frankly I cannot stand the Democrats or the Republicans. But I have to point the finger where it needs to point. And we're looking at, I tell everybody, regardless of what income-driven repayment plan you're in, if you're trying for public service loan forgiveness, assume that that's not going to happen. Maybe you're trying to pursue a borrower defense to repayment claim.
Right.
Probably safe to assume that is absolutely not going to happen under President Trump. It's just not.
You're absolutely right, Alan. I also don't want to give the Biden administration too much credit either, because even at best, public service loan forgiveness had at its highest an 8% success rate. And that is still an abysmally failing grade, right?
Yeah.
So
the Department of Education has never and will never want to cancel loans. Not until the threat of bankruptcy is back on our side, and they have to contend with that.
Something else I really want to highlight, especially Alan, when you were talking earlier about sort of the bad guys, right? It's important when you look at this problem, this national catastrophe, if you look at this objectively, the bad guys exist on both sides of the aisle here. This is on a personal level, I'm an independent by design because I feel that both parties are complicit in the deliberate extortion of 45 million student loan borrowers, spanning 4 generations now already. So I refuse to align myself as blue or red, because the reality is if parties know that your alliance is guaranteed, there is no impetus, there is no motivation to effectuate real change. So
I couldn't agree with you more.
So
the Democrats
deserves my vote at this time. And, this and the student debt crisis is something that everybody really needs to recognize is not a partisan issue. Over half of student loan borrowers are either Republican or independent. This is not a blue-haired coastal elite issue that is unique to privileged, Caucasian, wealthy coastal elitists. These are people,
blue-haired liberal snowflakes.
These are people who are truck drivers. These are people who are senior citizens. These are people who are teachers whose lives and livelihoods have been completely upended by student loan debt.
And I should probably throw in here, this is not a younger person's problem only either. In fact, it's more an older person's problem than a younger person's problem. There are more people over the age of 35 than under with student loans. There are more people over the age of 50 than under the age of 25 with student loans. And on average, the older groups owe around 300% more than the younger crowd. And remember, people over the age of 50, they borrowed very modestly. They borrowed very small amounts decades ago. And the fact that here today, they not only outnumber the younger crowd, but they owe 300% more. That is a sign of a failed loan program.
And Alan, just to add to that, come May 5th, senior citizens are going to start to have their Social Security checks garnished because of student loan debt.
That's right. I tell everybody it's pretty easy to get around a wage garnishment. You can become a 1099 contract employee. You can be your own boss. You can just tell your boss to tell the collection goon squad on the phone to come back with a court order, and we'll see about a wage garnishment. If they even just say that, chances are the snakes on the other end of the phone, and they are not the Department of Education, by the way. They'll go away. They'll find an easier prey. They'll go down the list to an easier victim.
But let's actually connect an additional overlapping crisis here, right? Because as senior citizens start to have their Social Security checks garnished, and for many seniors in this country, they rely solely on Social Security to get through the month, to provide for their basic needs. Once their Social Security checks begin to get garnished, how is that going to then affect their housing security and their food security as well? So we're looking
and their health.
Absolutely. So we're looking at a potential, God forbid, wave of senior homelessness that is induced by Social Security garnishments due to student loan debt.
And as if the homeless situation was not already catastrophically bad. Here in northern Wisconsin, not so much because homeless people can't survive the winters up here. But, I've lived in Southern California, and I remember how it was even 25 years ago, and it has mushroomed since then. And, we've interviewed a lot of people, not only in California, but around the country, homeless people who point to student loans and how their student loans got out of control, which was a major linchpin in their undoing.
Right.
So we're looking down the barrel of a really nasty gun here, ladies and gentlemen. I think you can agree. And the tariffs haven't even kicked in yet. We haven't seen what's going to happen with that. Are prices at Walmart going to be doubled for 80% of the stuff that they sell? Are the shelves going to be empty?
Yeah.
I can only implore Donald Trump to not listen to the lending crowd, not listen to the snakes and the swamp creatures. Quite frankly, he shouldn't be listening to Linda McMahon. He should be telling her what to do. And, Donald Trump himself said many years ago, he knew the student loan scam for what it was. He was like, why does the federal government making a profit on student loans? Why do they view student loans as a revenue source?
I think he needs to be reminded of that correct way of viewing this problem.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Lisa. And I would urge people, we shove those words into Donald Trump's face on Twitter, on the internet, all the time. And we do that through our daily actions. And, if just me and Lisa are doing the daily actions, not much of an impact. But, we've got 1.4 million people on our group who've signed up with our group through our petition, through our website, etc. When even 50% of the people on our group are actually doing those daily actions, Donald Trump will get the message. I guarantee you. And, once we get the leverage of bankruptcy returned, they're going to have to finally come around and do what they know they should have been doing for the past 10 years or more. They're going to have to cancel loans. And that's without anybody having to file. They're going to have to knock interest off. They're going to have to do negotiated settlements with individual borrowers on a case-by-case basis. They're going to have to do they're going to have to administer the IDR programs such that 90% of the people make it through, rather than 99.9% of the people being disqualified out of the programs. The leverage of bankruptcy, and the past 5 years has proven this too. The leverage of bankruptcy is absolutely the first thing that needs to happen if we're going to see anything meaningful beyond that. We've got to get our power back.
And I want to highlight on that point that the leverage of bankruptcy is not something that all Republicans are hostile to. We've seen prominent Republicans express support for the return of bankruptcy. When we this is going back a couple of years, but when S-2598 was still a viable bill.
Before the Democrats killed it.
We had the support, of course, from, the Republican co-signers, John Cornyn and Josh Hawley. So, I think it would be interesting to revisit this with both of them. And also, Ron DeSantis had expressed support for the return of bankruptcy. Tucker Carlson definitely has. So there are some
Tucker Carlson, Matt Gaetz, Josh Hawley. In fact, our bill had more Republican co-sponsors on it than Democratic co-sponsors as 2598.
Right. This is really
I need to do a short bitch about Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin just announced that he's not going to seek another term in the Senate. He's got a year and a half left. Democrat Dick Durbin, betrayed us so coldly on S-2598, which would have returned bankruptcy rights to student loans, would have clawed back a token amount from the colleges for discharges. I don't know if they would have ever even enforced that, but it was still, it was somewhat significant. But, shame on Dick Durbin, shame on Elizabeth Warren.
Chuck Schumer as well. He was made aware. If anyone's seen the movie Lone Wolves, if you've not, I highly suggest that you do. Chuck Schumer was made aware of the bill and he did nothing about it. He was in a really unique position to champion this bill. And, it really is because of the failure of S-2598 to even be brought up for a vote. It's the reason why I left the Democratic Party.
I'll tell you, Lisa, I'm the same way. And I mean, believe me, we worked very hard. Chuck Schumer gave a talk at USC for our film presentation, and our documentary aired on MSNBC. So we are not enemies with the Democrats, believe me. But we have to be honest.
When the Democrats held the presidency, the Congress, and the House. So.
That's right. The Democrats had a decades-long standing promise to return bankruptcy rights to student loans. And Biden came in.
Right? The fact that they failed really illustrates how much the lending industry has infiltrated both sides of the aisle.
The lending industry, I would say the colleges even to some extent. But on and on, and it's not that they failed to get it done. It's that they chose to not get it done.
They chose to let it die.
And the writing was on the wall. The election had already happened in November. So they knew they were losing their majority. And even still, Dick Durbin, at I think the urging of Elizabeth Warren, because she would not support that bill publicly. She wouldn't do it, even when asked by the Boston Globe. So shame on the Democrats. Oh, and lo and behold, they didn't say anything about student loans in the 2024 election. Nancy Pelosi, a friend of yours from California.
No, she's no friend of mine, but okay. California.
Nancy Pelosi and that whole California clutch of Democrats, they went to great lengths to kill the very modest student loan, very feeble cancellation that Biden attempted. And so, at this point, I kind of see the whole thing as a uniparty. I trust none of these parties or their politicians further than I can bowl them. And
I can only hope. You have to take a hard look at who profits from the status quo.
Yeah, that's right. And it's what's really troubling to me personally is that this is a problem so easily solved. All we need to do is strike one line of federal code and make sure that student loans are treated the same as all other loans, all other borrowers in this country, as the founding fathers called for in the Constitution. This is not hard. This is the simplest legislative fix in the world. And yet still...
and instead, both parties are distracting us with culture wars.
That's exactly right.
Instead of focusing on the actual problems that are affecting our lives and livelihoods.
Yeah. Since 2022, we didn't see that bill, S-25, we didn't see that bill reintroduced. And here we are nearly halfway through 2025. And even still, the Democrats seem to pretend that the student loan and the bankruptcy issue don't exist. And if they want to continue to circle the drain and become an extinct, an extincted party, then yeah, they should continue to go forward, not reflect on their failures, and just try and win elections based on how bad Trump is. That's exactly the wrong way to go. Shame on the Democrats for failing to do
I firmly believe that the abject failure of the Democratic Party to really bring front row center the scope and magnitude of the student debt crisis during the 2024 presidential election is one of the main reasons that Kamala Harris lost.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It was the one thing that pushed Biden over the top in 2020. And it was the one thing that Kamala took out of her platform in 2024.
No mention of it on the campaign trail.
No.
I mean, and instead trying to, blow smoke, up our backsides and, sort of try to pretend that the economy was doing really well and that everybody was prospering, and completely ignoring the visceral lived experiences of millions of Americans. We don't like to be lied to, and we don't like to be gaslit. And the Democratic Party did both.
That's right. And this is really a longer conversation. Unfortunately, I probably should cut it short here pretty soon, but we could talk for quite a while about how both parties have failed this country. I also no longer align myself with either party. That's been true for over a decade now. I think both parties collectively are betraying the American people. I see oligarchy. I see many of the things that Bernie Sanders, for example, points to: plutocracy, oligarchy, etc. But, with Bernie Sanders tied to a Democratic Party that is controlled by smug, arrogant, Learjet liberal billionaires like, for example, the Swig family, who's almost single-handedly killed student loan cancellation, friends of Nancy Pelosi. It's really hard for me to take people like Bernie Sanders or anyone that calls themselves a Democrat seriously. And then on the other hand, I have nothing good to say about the Republicans. In fact, the Republicans tend to be quite evil, like even on balance, far worse than the Democrats. And it's the greatest irony with the Republicans is that it is the red states that are being hurt worst on these student loans. If you look at the 10 best versus the 10 worst states, the 10 best states in terms of average student loan debt versus almost any metric, say average earnings, the best states are like Massachusetts and Washington State and all these. California is not bad. All these coastal elite states, and the worst hurt states is the South. It's the entire South, from Texas to Florida up to Virginia, over to Missouri, and everything in between. All those states are by far the worst hurt states. These are
including
Republican.
a lot of rural communities as well are being devastated by student loan debt.
Absolutely.
These are heartland, typically red-leaning voters.
Yeah, absolutely. Farmers, that is a very verifiable niche of student loan borrowers who are being
someone should report on that.
Yeah, people are starting to report on student loan debt specifically in farming communities. It's terrible. So we could go on for a long time, Lisa. I think I'll cut it short for now. Just to our audience, I'll be going on live in very shortly, 6 p.m. Eastern time on the John Curley Show in Seattle, Washington. So that's Cairo, Kiro news. Hopefully you can find it from there. But Lisa, what do you got going on, and what's on your agenda for the next foreseeable future?
Tomorrow, I'm looking forward to an interview on Rad Futures, and I continue to write prolifically around overlapping crises of housing affordability, student loan debt, homelessness, and low wages. And so I look forward to a continued presence in activism and in, I would say, ultimately, I'm considering running for office as well.
I love that. And, we will support you, whatever you should decide to run for. Whether I would prefer governor or senator. We need some stronger governors out there in the country. But I would just urge everybody out there, quit looking to the D's and the R's to vote for.
No.
I really think the time has come in this country for people to be voting for almost anyone but a D or an R.
Right. I challenge people to look past identity politics and culture wars and rather to look to the issues that unite us as people who are experiencing similar overlapping crises and people who we want these crises solved in logical and very coherent, sustainable ways. And this is something that crosses party lines. Don't get distracted. Stay true to what the truth is. And please join us. We need your voices.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think with that, we will bid everyone adieu.
Thank you for being
Lisa, thank you very much. Thanks
Sure.
for watching, everyone. Tell everybody you know about this group, studentloanjustice.org. We're very serious. We're a working fighting group. We need you with us fighting. Sitting on your hands, watching and waiting and worrying has never helped anyone, least of all you, on this problem. We can do this when we come together, whatever your political stripes are. And Lisa, everybody out there, I look forward to it. We'll see you soon. Good luck. Godspeed. And God bless everyone.
God bless. Don't let anyone take your vote for granted.
Hear, hear.